Every dead civilization had one rule: never wake Earth's warriors. The stars had always been a source of mystery for Captain Lyra Mason. As a child, she'd often lie on her back, gazing at the twinkling points of light that seemed so distant, so untouchable. She wondered what lay out there, beyond the known galaxy, beyond the reach of human exploration. Now, years later, aboard the Equinox, her ship and its crew were some of the most experienced explorers in known space, but the universe still held secrets beyond their wildest dreams. Lyra's voice was calm as she gave the order, though inside, her nerves were tight with anticipation. The crew had been on the verge of something monumental. A derelict structure had been found on a planet orbiting a dying star, one that had been wiped from any star charts millennia ago. It was on this forgotten world, now a husk of ash and stone, that the crew of the Equinox had stumbled upon something unlike anything they had ever encountered, an alien artifact that pulsed with unknown energy. "Captain," Lieutenant Drake's voice crackled over the intercom, "we're in range, beginning planetary descent now." "Understood. Keep your distance from the surface. I want the area mapped out before we land," Liara responded, glancing at the crew gathered in the command room. The ship trembled slightly as it shifted into the planet's gravity, but the Equinox was built for this. Her sleek form, a product of the most advanced technologies humanity had to offer, cut through the atmosphere with precision. A deep, low rumble reverberated through the hull as the planet's surface loomed larger on the view screen. A barren, cracked wasteland of ochre-colored dust and broken stone. "Anything unusual?" Lyra asked, eyes narrowing as she studied the data coming in. Drake, a tall, wiry man with a sharp jawline and even sharper mind, turned toward her. "Nothing on the scans yet, Captain. The readings are odd. There's a signal coming from deep within the ruins. It's artificial." Lyra's curiosity piqued. "Artificial? Are you sure the planet's dead?" "That's the strange part," Drake replied. "It's definitely man-made, but not anything we recognize. It doesn't match any known architecture or technology." Lyra nodded, turning her attention back to the massive planet below. They had landed on countless worlds, each with their own mysteries, but this one felt different. The air was thick with a sense of ancient power, a presence that was both oppressive and alluring. Something about it made her skin crawl, as though the world itself had been waiting for them. The landing was uneventful, and soon the crew had descended to the surface. Lyra led a small team, including Drake and the ship's chief engineer, Commander Althea Graves, toward the wreckage of what had once been an impressive city. The stone walls, now cracked and covered with layers of dust, were covered in strange symbols, glyphs that seemed to pulse faintly in the dim light. "This is something else," Althea murmured, inspecting the walls. Her fingers brushed against the carvings, and they glowed faintly. "It's almost as if the building itself is alive." "Keep your distance from the walls. We don't know how old this place is," Lyra warned. Though her voice lacked conviction, she too was intrigued, drawn toward the alien designs that seemed to breathe in the air. It was hard to shake the feeling that these ruins held far more than they could comprehend. As they ventured deeper into the structure, the air grew heavier, thick with the smell of aged stone and something else. Something metallic. The deeper they went, the more the odd hum filled the air. It was faint at first, almost imperceptible, but it grew louder as they passed through an archway into what appeared to be the heart of the ruins. In the center of the chamber, bathed in a soft violet glow, was the artifact. At first it seemed like nothing more than a shimmering disk, suspended in midair by an invisible force. It was a perfectly smooth surface, etched with the same swirling symbols that adorned the walls. The disk flickered occasionally, as if it were breathing. Its pulse synced to a rhythm that seemed unnervingly familiar. "Drake, do you have any readings on this thing?" Lyra asked, her voice tight with suspicion. Drake knelt next to his equipment, running scans. The readings were coming in erratically, the instruments unable to give a clear answer. This doesn't make sense. The radiation levels are off the charts. It's like nothing I've ever seen. The power sources—" He was interrupted by a sudden surge of energy. The disk flared brightly, and the ground beneath their feet trembled. A low, guttural rumble echoed through the chamber, and the entire structure seemed to groan in protest, as though the artifact had awakened something deep within the planet. "Get back!" Lyra shouted, but it was too late. The artifact emitted a sharp, piercing sound, followed by a violent pulse of energy that sent all three of them sprawling to the ground. Their vision blurred, and for a moment the world seemed to warp around them. When Lyra came to, she was disoriented. The room was still vibrating with the residual hum of the artifact, though it had dimmed, its glow now faint. She pushed herself to her feet, feeling an unnatural weight in the air. "Drake? Althea?" she called, her voice echoing in the chamber. "Here," came Althea's voice, faint but steady. Lyra turned to find her colleague standing, though she seemed shaken, her expression clouded. "What the hell was that? Did anyone else feel that?" Lyra nodded. "I felt it too. Something awoke." Drake stood next, brushing himself off and checking his equipment. "Captain, I don't understand. The artifact, it's still there, but it's connected to something ancient. Something alive," Althea murmured, as though piecing the words together. She stepped cautiously toward the disk, eyes fixed on its pulsating surface. "We've disturbed something that wasn't meant to be disturbed." Lyra's throat tightened. "And what if it's not just a relic? What if it's—" Before she could finish, the ship's communication system flickered to life. It was a call from their navigation officer, Lieutenant Roscoe, his voice strained. "Captain, you need to get back here, now." "What's going on, Lieutenant?" Lyra responded, her tone firm. There's something happening with the ship. It's like—" He broke off, a sudden sharp crackle filling the air before the transmission cut off entirely. Lyra's heart skipped a beat. "We need to move, now." The return to the surface was chaotic. The crew's calm and collected demeanor shattered as soon as they returned to the Equinox. The atmosphere was thick with a sense of dread that only worsened with every passing moment. The ship's systems were failing. The lights flickered. Strange power surges radiated through the hull. "Get us airborne now!" Lyra barked as the crew scrambled to respond. But as the ship began to rise, a new signal flared. This one emanating from deep within the planet. It was unmistakable. The energy had reached a critical threshold, a pulse so powerful that it seemed to tear through the fabric of space itself. The Equinox groaned as if under the weight of the signal, and then, through the chaos, they saw it. A massive, towering figure, standing at the edge of the ruins. At first it seemed like a shadow, but as the ship pulled away from the planet's surface, the figure became clearer. It was massive, impossibly so, standing taller than the tallest buildings they had ever seen. Its form was humanoid but elongated, covered in ancient armor, its face obscured by a helmet that glowed with an unearthly light. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. She could feel it, the undeniable presence of something ancient, something powerful, something that had been lying dormant for millennia. "Captain, what is that?" Drake's voice trembled, his eyes wide with fear and awe. "I think we've just woken Earth's warriors," Lyra whispered, her mind racing to make sense of what they were seeing. The walls of the ship seemed to vibrate as the figure raised its arm, as if to command the planet beneath it. The signal intensified. Whatever had been awakened was no mere myth or relic. It was a force of destruction. Lyra's mind raced through the countless warnings she had read, the ancient texts that spoke of Earth's forgotten history, warnings from civilizations long dead. "Every dead civilization had one rule," she murmured, her voice hoarse. "Never wake Earth's warriors." Every dead civilization had one rule: never wake Earth's warriors. Captain Lyra Mason had always found comfort in the silence of space. The deep, endless blackness stretched out like a vast ocean, far beyond the reach of human understanding. The stars, their distant lights flickering like the eyes of forgotten gods, were the only companions of her thoughts as she piloted the Equinox deeper into the galaxy. She had grown used to the solitude of command, but even now, as she stood at the helm, a gnawing sense of unease tugged at her gut. "Captain, we're approaching the coordinates." Lieutenant Drake's voice crackled through the ship's comms, breaking the silence. His tone was steady, yet there was an underlying tension that Lyra could sense. "The planet's in sight." Lyra leaned forward in her chair, her fingers hovering over the controls. She glanced at the readouts on the screen. The planet below was unlike any she had ever seen. A dying world, its atmosphere burned away by a dying star, its surface cracked and barren, stripped of life. It was a world forgotten by time, abandoned for millennia, its existence marked only by ancient star charts. The artifact they had been sent to recover had been found in the ruins of what appeared to be a long-lost civilization hidden deep within the heart of the planet. The initial scans had shown strange, inexplicable readings, a signal, faint but persistent, emanating from the ruins of a city. And now the Equinox was here to investigate, to uncover the mysteries of a civilization that had long since passed into the void of history. "Prepare the crew," Lyra ordered, her voice cutting through the tension in the room. "Drake, run a final diagnostic on the landing gear. We don't know what kind of terrain we're dealing with down there." "Yes, Captain," Drake responded, his fingers flying over his console. The ship's systems hummed in response as the final checks ran through. Lyra turned to face her second-in-command, Lieutenant Roscoe, who stood nearby, monitoring the ship's exterior systems. "Keep a close eye on the atmospheric readings. I don't want any surprises." Roscoe nodded, his eyes scanning the data. "Understood, Captain. The air down there's thin but breathable, minimal interference from the planet's dying star, though we're picking up some strange fluctuations in the magnetic field. Could be some residual energy from the artifact." The thought of something still lingering after so many years sent a shiver through Lyra. She had read about ancient relics, artifacts of power that had shaped the course of civilizations, sometimes for the better, and other times for the worse. But there was something about this one that felt different. They were not just here to retrieve an artifact. They were here to uncover something that had been hidden for a reason. The Equinox descended into the planet's gravity well, the rumble of the ship's thrusters becoming more pronounced as it cut through the thin atmosphere. Lyra could feel the tension in the air as the crew prepared for the landing. The viewports above her offered a glimpse of the barren world below. Rugged, desolate landscapes stretching as far as the eye could see. Jagged mountains, vast canyons, and ancient stone structures, their crumbling forms barely visible beneath the dust of ages, painted a picture of a civilization long gone. "Landing coordinates locked in," Roscoe said. "Prepare for descent in 10 seconds." Lyra held her breath, fingers pressing into the armrests of her chair as the Equinox touched down with a soft jolt. The ship's stabilizers hummed and the engines cut off, leaving an eerie silence in their wake. "Planet Foal," Lyra muttered under her breath. "Let's make it quick." The crew disembarked in small groups, armed and ready for anything, though the feeling of unease seemed to cling to them like a second skin. Lyra led the way, her boots crunching against the dust as she stepped onto the surface of the long-dead world. A cold wind swept across the plain, kicking up clouds of dust that swirled around their feet, carrying the faint scent of something metallic in the air. There was no life here, no signs of movement, only the remnants of a civilization that had long since crumbled. "Stay sharp," Lyra instructed, her voice low and commanding. "We don't know what we're walking into." Lieutenant Drake followed closely behind her, his scanner out, picking up faint signals as they moved deeper into the heart of the ruins. The walls around them were covered in strange symbols, twisting, curling patterns that seemed almost alive as the wind tugged at the dust. It was as though the very stone was imbued with an ancient energy, one that had not been disturbed in eons. "Look at this," Drake said, kneeling by a series of markings carved into the stone. "This isn't like anything I've ever seen. These symbols, there's an intelligence behind them, but it's not human." "Careful," Lyra warned, her voice tight. She glanced at the others. "Everyone, keep your distance. We don't know what these structures might be capable of." They continued deeper into the ruins, following the readings from Drake's scanner. The further they went, the more the oppressive feeling grew. It was as though something was watching them, waiting for them to make the next move. Lyra's pulse quickened, but she forced herself to remain calm. The team needed her to be steady, to lead them through whatever lay ahead. Soon they came upon a large open chamber, its floor cracked and uneven. At the center of the chamber, there it was, the artifact. It was suspended in the air, hovering about a foot off the ground. The object seemed to pulse with an energy that sent ripples through the air, distorting the space around it. It was circular in shape, its surface smooth and reflective, covered in the same alien symbols that adorned the walls. The artifact's glow was soft at first, a pale violet light that shimmered faintly in the dimness of the chamber. "Drake, get your scanner readings on that thing," Lyra ordered, taking a cautious step forward. Drake complied, his fingers tapping rapidly over the device in his hand. "It's giving off an enormous energy signature, Captain, but the readings are all over the place. It's as if it's fluctuating in and out of phase with normal space-time. Whatever this thing is, it's far beyond our understanding." Lyra studied the object carefully, noting the way it seemed to hum with an almost imperceptible rhythm, like the beating of a heart. What kind of technology could create something like this, she wondered aloud. "We don't know," Drake replied, "but I'm getting something else. The artifact's energy signature. It's aligned with the coordinates we found in the old data archives. This place, it's a dead world, but it's not without purpose. It was built for this." "Built for what?" Lyra asked, though she feared she already knew the answer. As if in response, the artifact suddenly flared brightly, casting a harsh light across the chamber. The floor beneath their feet trembled, and a deep, rumbling hum filled the air. Lyra's heart raced as the vibrations intensified. "Something's happening," she said, panic creeping into her voice. "Drake, get a read on this. Althea, stand by the airlocks. Get us ready for evacuation." But before they could react, a sharp crack pierced the air, and the artifact erupted with an explosion of light. The force of the blast sent the crew members flying backward, their bodies slammed against the stone walls of the chamber. Lyra's vision blurred as she struggled to regain her senses, a ringing in her ears drowning out everything else. For a moment there was only darkness. When Lyra opened her eyes again, the chamber was still. The artifact had dimmed, its glow now a faint flicker, but the tremors continued. The air around them was thick with residual energy, a charge that seemed to coat everything in the room. She struggled to her feet, her mind racing. What had just happened? And what had they awakened? "Everyone okay?" she asked, her voice hoarse as she checked the crew. Drake was the first to stand, his face pale but determined. "We're all alive. Barely." His hands shook as he checked his scanner again. This isn't just a relic, Captain. It's a warning." "A warning?" Lyra asked. She had to know more. "What do you mean?" "The symbols," Drake said slowly, his voice low. "They're a warning to anyone who would awaken it. Whatever this thing is, it's not meant to be disturbed." Before Lyra could respond, the communication system crackled to life, cutting her off. "Captain Mason," came the voice of Lieutenant Roscoe over the comms, his tone strained. "Something's happening with the ship. We're picking up strange readings, Captain. And I think we're not alone." Lyra's heart sank. Something was happening, and it wasn't good. "Everyone back to the ship now," she ordered, her voice cutting through the rising tension. "Move out." As the crew scrambled to regroup, Lyra's mind raced. They had discovered the artifact, but what they had awakened was far more dangerous than they had ever anticipated. Every dead civilization had one rule: never wake Earth's warriors. Lyra Mason's pulse raced as she sprinted through the corridors of the Equinox, her boots echoing on the metal floors. The low hum of the ship's systems was the only sound besides the pounding of her heart. She had seen the crew moving with purpose, but the chaos in the air was palpable. Whatever they had disturbed on the surface, whatever ancient force they had awoken, was already beginning to ripple through the ship. The comms had gone dark for several minutes, but when they had finally come back online, it was not Roscoe's voice that greeted her. It was the captain of the ship's ancient, forgotten systems. The voice of a machine that seemed to know more about the situation than the crew did. "Captain Mason, you need to return to the command deck immediately." The cold voice of the ship's AI resonated in her earpiece, its tone formal but urgent. She pushed herself faster, ignoring the weight in her chest. The corridors twisted like a labyrinth, but she knew every turn. Still, the sense of urgency pulling her forward felt strange, and when she finally arrived at the command deck, the atmosphere had changed. Rascal was already at the communications panel, his face pale as he looked up at her, his eyes wide with fear. "Captain, we've got a problem." "What's happening?" Lyra asked, her voice steady despite the unease that slithered in her gut. Roscoe didn't respond immediately. Instead, he gestured to the viewport where a strange and unfamiliar phenomenon was unfolding outside. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. The planet beneath them had begun to shift, as if the Earth itself were waking up. The surface was rippling with energy waves, pulses of violet and crimson light weaving through the dust like lightning in a storm. It wasn't just the energy from the artifact. This felt alive, as though the planet was reacting to their intrusion. "Is this normal?" Lyra asked, her voice barely a whisper. "No," Roscoe replied, his voice trembling. "And it's getting worse. We're picking up massive fluctuations in the planet's gravitational field. The atmosphere's becoming unstable. Captain, the ship's systems, they're fighting to maintain stability. I think we're being pulled toward the surface." Lyra's stomach sank. She knew the ship's gravitational dampeners were state-of-the-art, capable of withstanding all but the most intense forces. But the fluctuations were something else entirely. The ship was caught in something far more powerful than any tech they had on board. "Status on the artifact?" she asked, turning toward the science console where Drake was furiously typing commands into his scanner. "It's responding, Captain," Drake said, not looking up. His face was tight with concentration. "The energy readings are off the charts. I think it's calling something we can't fully understand." Lyra moved closer to his station, her eyes scanning the flickering readouts. The energy was pulsing, radiating from the artifact in a way that was almost sentient. She had heard of relics from ancient civilizations that had remained dormant for centuries, but this was something else entirely. "I don't think this artifact was just a tool," she said softly, almost to herself. "I think it's part of something larger, a force." "We need to leave, Captain," Drake said, his voice suddenly urgent. "We're risking everything just being here. The artifact, it's too powerful. Whatever it is, it's connected to something much larger than this planet." Lyra stood tall, her eyes fixed on the planet below. She could feel the pull of the unknown, like an invisible hand gripping her heart. They had come this far. She couldn't just turn away now. But the risk was clear. Whatever was buried beneath the planet was waking, and it was far more dangerous than they had anticipated. "We're not leaving yet," she said firmly, her voice steady as she turned to address the rest of the crew. "We need more answers, and we're going to get them." The crew gathered around the command table, their faces grim as they reviewed the data coming in from the surface. The readings were erratic, the power fluctuations growing stronger with each passing minute. Outside the ship, the landscape of the planet had begun to warp, mountains shifting, deep chasms opening, and structures rising from the dust like the skeletal remains of giants. The signs were unmistakable. Earth's warriors were awakening. "Captain," Althea Graves, the ship's chief engineer, said, her voice tight with urgency. "We can't hold on much longer. The ship's integrity is being compromised. I'm seeing cracks in the outer hull from the pressure building up." Lyra's brow furrowed. "What exactly do you mean by cracks?" "Pressure points," Althea replied. "We're being pulled downward. It's as if we're in the grip of something massive, an invisible hand that's slowly crushing the ship." Lyra felt a cold chill at the base of her spine. She knew the Equinox could withstand gravitational anomalies, but this was something entirely different. Something alive, something with purpose. "We've already triggered it," Lyra whispered, more to herself than anyone else. "It's not just an artifact, it's a beacon." "A beacon for what?" Drake asked. Lyra's eyes shifted to the viewport, where the twisted landscape below now revealed its full horror. Ancient statues, twisted colossal beings, rising from the surface, their eyes glowing with a menacing light. These were the Earth's warriors, the mythological protectors of the planet, long buried beneath centuries of forgotten history. These beings were more than legends. They were real, and they were waking up. Althea's face darkened, her mouth tight with frustration. "This isn't a time for curiosity, Captain. This is a time for survival." Before Lyra could respond, the comms crackled to life once more, and it was Roscoe's voice that came through, but this time it was filled with a cold terror. "Captain, you need to see this." Lyra bolted toward the communications station. On the view screen, the planet below was no longer just a static image. It was alive. The ground was shifting, churning, as enormous cracks began to split the surface open, revealing something far darker beneath. The warriors had risen, massive, armored figures, towering over the remains of the ruined city, were emerging from the earth, their eyes glowing like molten lava. "What the hell?" Roscoe muttered, his voice low. The main screen flickered. On the surface below, the first of the warriors, massive hulking figures, began to move toward the ship. They were like gods of war, their forms clad in ancient glowing armor that reflected the violet and crimson light of the planet. The air crackled with raw, untamed power. "Do you see them?" Drake whispered, his voice tense. "It's as if the whole planet is alive. The warriors, they're connected to the artifact. They're waking because of us." Lyra's hand gripped the command console, her knuckles white. "We're too late," she murmured. "They're not just waking up. They're being summoned. You should have never come here." Lyra stood frozen, her mind racing. The warriors had been summoned, and they were here for one purpose only, to reclaim the Earth.